السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
كيف حالك يا حبيب؟ How are you doing أخي؟
أنا كيف حالك أنت؟
الحمد لله بخير. Let's begin إن شاء الله تعالى. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. A quick audio check. My voice is clear inshallah.
Yeah.
Very good. طيب. We studied in our previous lesson, we talked about the types of kalimat, the types of words in the Arabic language. And in this class, I just want to give you a holistic idea about the study of language and a holistic idea about Nahw as a whole, because we're getting into ilm al-Nahw and ilm al-Sarf, because this book, Sullam ud-Duroos al-Arabiyyah by Sheikh Mustafa al-Ghalayini, it covers the basics of both Nahw and Sarf. It covers the basics of both Nahw and Sarf. The first point that is important to understand, the first point which is important to understand is that what do we mean by language? What do we mean by language or lughah? What do we mean by that, right? Now, Sheikh Mustafa al-Ghalayini himself, this author, Sheikh Mustafa al-Ghalayini, this Sheikh, a great scholar, he has written two works on the rules of the Arabic language. One is this work in front of us. It's called Sullam ud-Duroos al-Arabiyyah. And this work he wrote for the beginners. He wrote this work for the beginners, the absolute beginners, those who are starting their journey in learning the sciences of the Arabic language. Another work which he wrote is for more intermediate to advanced learners. It's called Jami' ud-Duroos al-Arabiyyah. And that's the more famous work, Jami' ud-Duroos al-Arabiyyah by Sheikh Mustafa al-Ghalayini. In that book, he defines language. He talks about language and he defines it. He says, the overall meaning of which is that language is alfaz, right? Utterances, which are sounds which people use in order to communicate, in order to express meanings within themselves. That's the overall meaning of his definition in general. And there's a very famous Pakistani scholar as well, Sheikh Ata'ullah al-Multani. I don't remember the reference now, but in his explanation of Irshad al-Sarf, I don't remember clearly, but I think in his explanation of Irshad al-Sarf, which is a famous primer in Sarf, studied in the Indian subcontinent, he also gives a similar definition where he mentions the overall meaning of which is that language is a bunch of sounds which people use to express meanings, basically, to convey their intentions, to convey meanings within them, right? So we can say language is, sounds or utterances. Sheikh Mustafa uses the word alfaz, which translates to utterances. Sheikh Ata'ullah uses the word, Sheikh Mustafa uses the word alfaz, which means utterances. Sheikh Ata'ullah uses the word aswat, which means sounds, right? So sounds or utterances. Why are we saying sounds? Because when we are pronouncing a word, it's made up of sounds, right? So when I say asad, that's made up of sounds, and sa and da. When I say Muhammad, that's made up of sounds. And a lafz by definition is sounds which consist of letters, which are constituent of letters. So a language is sounds or utterances which are used for communication between a people, between a qawm, right? Between a people. Or yes, it's sounds and utterances which are used to convey their meanings and intentions within them. And this general definition applies to every language, right? Whether that's English, Arabic, Spanish, Pashto, Urdu, any language, every language this definition applies to, right? Every language is sounds or utterances which are used for communication between a people. Now, initially, right, or even amongst natives, the main way for learning language is that you get it naturally. You get it naturally. It's passed on naturally from generation to generation, right? Students don't really, or not students, but people don't really quote unquote learn, right? Uh, they don't quote unquote learn rules in order to get to know their language, right? So, for example, I'm Pakistani and my parents spoke Urdu. I learned Urdu by virtue of basically mimicking them and by listening to them, right? I never studied Urdu as a subject, or maybe for a very short period initially, but I never really properly studied Urdu as a subject. I acquired it naturally, right? So languages are passed between the native people from generation to generation, right? That's the normal way of how languages pass. Another way languages are acquired is by way of immersion, by way of immersion. So a foreigner goes to a land and he doesn't know their language, but he starts living there. And by living there, he picks up their language. That's learning by way of immersion, right? Generally, those are the two ways for acquiring language. What happened in the early days of the Islamic Empire, so during the Khilafah of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu an, what happened at that time was that it was seen that people's ability to speak language was getting weak, the Arabic language. Now, for right now, we were talking about language in general. Now we're moving on to the Arabic language, a bit about its history. The Arabic language was spoken as a native language by the Sahaba. It was their mother tongue. They already knew it. The Quran was being revealed in their language. Now, after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Islam's and we had the Rashidun Caliphate, the Caliphate of the four Khulafa, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali radiyallahu anhum jami'a, ridwanullahi alayhim. During their time, the Islamic Empire started to expand, and many non-Arab nations became a part of the Ummah. They became a part of the Islamic nation. They became a part of the Islamic Empire. And because of that, they also started to learn the Arabic language. The Quran is in Arabic, and they started to learn the Arabic language. Now, during that time, the ability to speak the language, because of this mixing with non-Arabs, it started to weaken. So in order to preserve the rules of the language, sciences or disciplines or subjects like Nahw, like Sarf, like Balagha came in place. Initially, the Sahaba knew these things, knew Nahw, Sarf, Balagha innately, naturally. They knew it. They didn't have to learn rules. It was their mother tongue. But when the ability to speak language started to weaken, right, because of intermingling with non-Arabs, what happened? The ulama, they started to compile the rules of the Arabic language. From the earliest accounts that we have is Ali radiallahu an ordering Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali to compile rules of the Arabic language, right? And this project continued after that. And
Sorry, which, sorry.
come again?
Which Sahaba Ali ordered who? Sorry.
Ali radiallahu an ordered a tabi'i by the name of Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali. Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali. Abu al-Aswad was not a Sahabi. He was from the
Oh,
companions of Ali radiallahu anh. Ali radiallahu anh ordered him to compile the rules of the Arabic language, and Abu al-Aswad he started to do that. And this study developed. The students of Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali took from him, and then this chain continued. Eventually, we get great scholars like Khalil bin Ahmad al-Farahidi, who is considered to be the writer of the first Arabic dictionary called Al-Ain. We get Sibawayh, Al-Imam Sibawayh, who is considered to have written the first proper work on Nahw, called Al-Kitab. His book Al-Kitab is considered to be the first proper work of Nahw. It contains rules of Sarf as well. And this movement.
sorry.
Come again?
Who's the author of Al-Kitab? Who's the author of Al-Kitab?
Sibawayh.
Okay.
Sibawayh is the author of Al-Kitab. Eventually, you also got two schools of Nahw. So you had the Basran school and you had the Kufan school. The Basran school had a number of imams, and they had their own particular method. The Kufan school had its own particular method as well. And this research continued. Sarf initially was considered a part of Nahw. Sarf initially was considered a part of Nahw. Nahw was a broad term which included rules of both syntax and morphology. So Nahw included Sarf. But later on, Sarf became an independent discipline when scholars started to write separate works on Sarf. It is said that Abu Uthman al-Mazini is the first, or from the first, who wrote a separate work on Sarf. Yeah, that's in brief, right? Now, the way these sciences develop is that you have each science looking at a particular element of that language. So you can imagine language as you can imagine language as this whole circle is language, is lugha, is the Arabic language, right? One of its elements is looking at, for example, one of its elements is the features of pronunciation in Arabic, right? Like how to pronounce Hamza, like how to pronounce Ain, how to pronounce Ha, right? This has its own study. It was majorly studied in the science called Tajweed, right? Makharij al-Huruf and so on and so forth. And now you have a whole modern discipline called Ilm al-Aswat, right? Ilm al-Aswat. So that's a discipline looking at one particular element of the Arabic language. Then you have disciplines looking at the Arabic language from the perspective of the word, right? From the perspective of the word. Let's try to make this a bit more clean, right? So, okay, that's better, right? So one particular element is ilm al-aswat, right? There are sciences which look at the individual word, the Arabic word. So the sciences which look at the individual, or the discipline which looks at the individual word from the perspective of its structure is Sarf. It's Sarf. Sarf looks at the Arabic language from the perspective of the structure of the individual word, right? So for example, any word, ضرب, what's the structure of ضرب? ضارب, مضروب, ناصر, نصر, right? Sarf looks at the individual structures of words and how structures change to form new words, right? So how did we form the word ضارب? How did we form the word ضرب? And so on and so forth. That's what Sarf looks at. Another science looks at relationships between individual words. And some scholars consider it to be a part of ilm al-sarf, and that's called ilm al-ishtiqaq. You have ilm al-ishtiqaq, that's another discipline, right? The study of etymology, ilm al-ishtiqaq. Then you also have sciences which look at the meaning of the word, because the individual word, it has a structure, but it also has a meaning. So which sciences look at the meaning? It's more popularly known as ilmul ma'ajim, ilmul ma'ajim, or ilmul mufradat as well, right? The dictionaries, and it's a separate science. So from the perspective of the word, you have different Arabic sciences looking at different elements of the Arabic language, and even looking at one element of that language from different perspective. So the science which studies the structure and formation of words, that's sarf. The science which studies the relationship between words, that's ishtiqaq. The science which studies the meanings of words, that's ilm al-ma'ajim, ilm al-mufradat. Then you have sciences which study the Arabic sentence. So you had sciences studying sounds or phonetic features, sciences studying words, and then you have sciences studying the Arabic sentence. The science which studies the structure of the Arabic sentence, that's Nahw. That's Nahw, right? The science which studies the nuance in meanings when you change the structure is Balagha. It's Balagha. You also have sciences which study poetry. So sciences which study poetry from the perspective of their physical structure, the physical structure of poetry, that's called ilm al-arudi wal-qawafi. It studies the rhyme, the rhyming pattern, it studies the different meters, and so on and so forth. My point in explaining this is that when you see all these different sciences, understand that the relationship between them. All of these sciences, their aim is to study the Arabic language as a whole, but each science is studying a particular element of the Arabic language. The three most important sciences, which are the foundations of everything else, are Nahw, Sarf, Balagha. That's why we hear the names of these three again and again. Ulama talking about them and mentioning them again and again. We see this, right? Nahw, Sarf, and Balagha, these are the main sciences, which are the foundational sciences to understand everything else. Now, what's the difference between Nahw and Sarf? All right, what's the difference? You should have already understood that Sarf studies the individual Arabic word before it's put in a sentence. Sarf has nothing to do with the Arabic sentence. Sarf does not study the Arabic sentence. Sarf does not discuss the Arabic sentence. Sarf is interested in the structure and formation of individual words, right? So when you have individual words like daraba, that's an individual word. You have individual words like rajul, individual word. That's what Sarf is interested in. Sarf is interested in the structure of that word, and whether or not other words can be formed from it, and so on and so forth. Right? What do we mean by the structure of a word? The structure of a word includes four things. Number one, it includes the number of letters that are in the word. So daraba has 3 letters. Da, ra, ba. That's a part of the structure. Also the order of these letters. Darab, so da comes first, then ra, then ba. Also the harakat and the sakanat. Harakat like fatha, dhamma, kasra, and sukun. So daraba has 3 fathas. And number 4, which letters are original, which letters are additional. You don't need to worry about that at the moment. These things form the structure of the word. Sarf studies how the structure changes. Sarf studies how the structure changes. So for example, daraba is fi'l madi. When you want to form mudari', you will add a ya to it. You will take away the fatha from the da and give it a sukun. You will take away the fatha from the ra, you will give it a kasra. You will take away the fatha from the ba and give it a dhamma. Look at how the structure changed. You added a letter, yeah. You changed the harakat and the sakanat. You changed the structure to form a different word. This is what Sarf is interested in. Sarf is interested in how these words are formed and what their structures are. That's ilm al-Sarf in a nutshell. What about Nahw? Nahw is interested mainly in the Arabic sentence, how sentences are formed. Nahw is interested in how the Arabic sentence is formed. And so it studies words, it studies individual words, but from the perspective of when they're put in a sentence, what their grammatical function is. That's what Nahw is interested in. Nahw is interested in words and sentences, but it's interested in words from the perspective of i'rab, from the perspective, or we can say from the perspective of the grammatical function of that word once it's put in a sentence. So when I say, for example, ذهب الرجل إلى السوق. الرجل, Sarf is interested in the structure of the word. Nahw is not interested in the structure. Nahw is interested in the grammatical function of the word. So ذهب الرجل إلى السوق. Nahw only looks at the ending of the word to find out its grammatical function, because Arabic is a language in which the grammatical function is known through markers, through alamat in a word. Whether the word is a subject or the object, it's not always known through the position, right? So for example, in English, we say the man went, the man was hit, the man lives, and so on and so forth. In English, the structure remains pretty much the same, right? So in English, you can tell generally from the positioning and so on and so forth whether the word is the subject or the object. In Arabic, that's not always the case. In Arabic, you look at the ending of the word to find out what grammatical function it has. Ar-rajulu here has a dhamma. And in this case, it shows that it is the fa'il or the subject in this sentence. Right? Ila suq, that's the object. So in Nahw, in the Arabic language, we get to know whether the word is the subject or the object by looking at its ending, which marker is there, which alama is there, which sign is there. That sign tells us whether the word is the subject or the object, or whether it's or whether it has a different grammatical function. So Nahw is interested in the grammatical function of words in an Arabic sentence. It's not interested in the structure of words. Sarf is studied in the structure of words and how other words are formed. That, in brief, is what Nahw and Sarf are, in brief. And that's the main difference between Nahw and Sarf. Nahw and Sarf are the foundation. Nahw and Sarf are the foundational sciences. Now, the first thing that one needs to understand, and this is relevant to both Nahw and Sarf, the first thing which needs to be understood is that in Arabic, every single word in Arabic is going to be one of three types. Every word. Open the Quran, open the Sunnah, go through the speech of the Arabs. You will find that every single word is going to be one of three types. Either it's going to be an ism, or a fi'l, or a harf. That's it. This is the first foundational point. Everything else in Nahw and Sarf is built on this point. Everything else. Everything else in Nahw and Sarf is built on this point. Types of words. There are three types of words in the Arabic language. Ism, fi'l, harf. Three types of words. No fourth type. So when you open the Quran and you want to sort out which word is what, it's either going to be an ism, or a fi'l, or a harf. And each of these words, they in Sarf, they have different structures, and in Nahw, they have different grammatical functions. So being able to recognize them is very important. Being able to tell the difference between them is very important. All right? Now, how do we tell the difference? There are two ways. There are two ways for telling the difference. Number one is by way of definition. And number two is by way of markers or alamat, signs, distinguishing features, right? Let's start off with definitions. A very simple definition of a noun, a very simple definition of a noun is that it's a naming word. Of an ism is that it's a naming word. It's a name. It's going to be a name of a person or a place or a thing or an idea or a concept. Beauty is a noun. Muhammad, the word is a noun. New York, noun. Chair, noun. Table, noun. Car, noun. So one way you can recognize it is when you're reading words, you see, okay, is this the name of something, of a concept, of an idea, or so on and so forth. A more complex definition, which is given by Nuhat, is that a noun, an ism, is a word which has a complete meaning of its own, and, or you can say it has an independent meaning, and it does not denote a time frame. So number one, an ism is a word which has a complete meaning of its own. So when you hear the word, you'll understand the complete meaning. When you hear rajul, you understand that it means a man. So you're understanding a complete meaning. When you hear the word sayyara, it means car. You understand the complete meaning. When you hear the word tawila, table, you understand the complete meaning. And this meaning is not connected with a time. with a not, is not connected with a time frame. We can say here, instead